Welcome to Sakshi TV's special immigration show with attorney Ms. Prashanthi Reddy from the law offices of Prashanthi Reddy PLLC. Ms. Prashanthi needs no introduction, but if you need consultation, please log on to reddyesq.com site. The reddyesq.com site provides you with latest and cutting-edge information on US immigration law and policies explained in terms you don't have to be a lawyer to understand. Today's topic is change in SOC codes, how it affects your next H1 filing, H1 RFEs as well. And we will continue the knowledge session along with the news and updates on latest immigration, followed by Q&A. Hi, Ms. Reddy, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Tony. How are you?
Very well, thank you. So, looks like we have a lot to discuss today. So, which exact topic would you want to start off with? The SOC code or H1 RFEs? Which one?
Well, let's talk about the SOC codes first, and then if we have time, we can talk about H1B
Right.
RFEs. I mean, they're both kind of related, but so I'll explain how. So when you're filing a H1 or you're filing a prevailing wage for a PERM application, there is a website called onet.org. And that website has a wealth of information on all kinds of job titles. So every job title is issued a code, which is called an SOC code. So that's what an SOC code is. So in addition to being issued a code, the job title will have alternative job titles. Job duties are mentioned. The commonly used skill sets are mentioned. The job zone is also mentioned. Job zone basically means, is it job zone 1 to 5? If it's job zone 4 or above, those positions are considered to be specialty occupations, because job zone 4 and above requires a bachelor's or a higher degree. And as we know, in order to file a H1, the main principle of a specialty occupation position which qualifies for a H1 is that the position require a bachelor's degree in a specific field. So the SOC codes are on this ONET website, and before you file the H1, the first thing you have to do is identify what your job is. And then you have to go to this ONET, and then you have to look for your job and look for your code on that website. And then, because the code is required to be put into, the first step, which is filing of the LCA, the labor condition application. So without going into ONET, you cannot file a H1. And the other useful thing for the ONET or the SOC codes is that they help you identify which positions qualify for a H1 and which don't. As I was saying, they tell you which one require a bachelor's and which don't. So that's what an SOC code is. That's what the SOC codes are. And so recently, they have revamped this whole SOC, the ONET website. They have changed a lot of the codes. They have changed the job titles. They have changed the job duties. So now in order to file a H1, you have to go back and look into that website again, because what you presume to be true under the previous 2010 SOC codes may not be true for 2018. So some job which would have qualified for a H1 may not qualify for a H1 anymore, right? So we have to go take a look into it. That's why it's so important. It's the very basis for filing a H1. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the new SOC codes came up last year, but they couldn't be used because there are two different other websites, other portals. One is the FLCA data portal, which allows you to pull out the prevailing wage, which is another component that you require to file a H1. And the other portal is the portal that actually allows you to file, the flag portal, which allows you to file the LCA online. So these two portals were not in sync with the new SOC codes. So even though the SOC codes were available a few months ago, they couldn't be used because the old codes were still appearing in all these other portals. So as of July 1st, the 2018, the new codes, the 2018 codes are available. As of July 1st, any cases filed after July 1st, they will be filed with the new codes and the new titles. So the completely revamped ONET. The other change that has happened, in addition to the SOC code change, is the wages have changed. Every July of every year, the wages change. So the wage change information also has come out as of July 1st, and of course there's been an increase. There is always an increase in wages. So it's been two changes. One, changes in the codes itself and the requirements in the job title, job duties, and changes in the code. So there have been a lot of changes as a result of this revamping. For example, one of them is that software developer, which is the most commonly used job title, is previously was under 151132, and that has been changed now. So there used to be three different codes for software developer, software developer applications, software developer systems. So all that has been clubbed into one category, software developer, and the new code has been given to it. So that's just one example of what has happened. So compared to the 2010 SOC codes, the 2018 SOC codes, there are about 27 new detailed occupations. So previously non-existent occupations. So what would happen previously is you would have to find an occupation that was closest to your occupation and argue that that's the right code to use. Now, since we have more occupations, we don't have to make those arguments and we don't have to subject ourselves to USCIS scrutiny. So the 2019 SOC codes includes a total of 867 occupations, and these are classified into 459 broad occupations.
Wow.
And these broad occupations are again classified into 98 minor and 23 major occupations. So out of the total 867 occupations that are in the 2018 structure, 472 have not changed at all. So you can say that, more than half have not changed, but a pretty big majority have changed, because 472 out of 867. So there's been a massive overhaul in this whole ONET system. So as I was saying, the new ONET system starting from July 1st, and because the new SOC code started being reflected in the FLC data system and in the flag. Also for your prevailing wages, when you file a PERM, you have to first get a prevailing wage approval. Again, to file a prevailing wage approval, you need an SOC code. You have to follow the new codes. And if there's any changes in that, so for example, if a software engineer previously said bachelor's and now says master's, then that changes everything. Because then, when you're filing a labor cert, you can ask for a master's and it will not be considered to be overreaching. It will not be considered to be unusual or above, industry standards. So you don't have to give any additional justification. I'm just giving you an example. I'm not saying software engineering requires masters, but I'm giving you an example of how things could change even for the PERM application. So there's some details of more details of things that have changed. So for example, some job titles, to give you an example, software quality assurance analyst, web and digital interface designer, these two job titles, they were in another job title previously. They were hidden in software engineer, software quality assurance analyst. Now they have removed it from that job title and made it as an independent job title. So that's few of the change. Same thing with web and digital interface. So the advantage of giving an independent job title and code, for example, for software quality assurance analysts, is there is much more information now available for this job title because it has its own code. The duties are more specific to that particular job title, and there is information as to whether a bachelor's degree is required or not. So rather than having it as a related occupation for some other job title and then having to prove to USCIS that it is related, it's better that it has its own independent code now. Another change that has happened is, for example, there used to be a lot of titles under all other occupations because they didn't have enough information about them. For example, data scientist. Data scientist is a very up and coming field to be in, and it's about mining data. So this, for a long time, we didn't have a code for it. It was clubbed under all other occupations, and there was barely any information on this data scientist code. And therefore, it was always difficult for us to use that particular job title, even though there are so many people who are working as data scientists, because then we would have to independently justify that a bachelor's degree is required for the position, because there's no information on it, because there's no separate, there wasn't a separate job or a code for it. Now there's plenty of information. We can see whether bachelor's degree is required or not, and we can easily file a H1 for this code. Sorry. In addition, as I was saying, some job titles have been clubbed. Like they've clubbed 3 or 4 different things under one job title.
Ms. Reddy, do you want to take a small break to have a sip of water, probably?
I'm fine. Thanks, Tony. So, like software developer application, software developer, software system, I was just saying all of them have been clubbed now under 1.5.1251 under software developers. So now you no longer have 3 different occupations. It's all clubbed under one. Same thing has happened for control tool programmers and control tool operators. We haven't used that much, but just useful to know. And in addition to that, there have been changes with many other job titles. For example, computer systems analysts, there's been a change with the code. Nothing else has changed, but the code has changed from 1.5.1121 to 1.5.1211. For software developers, as I said, has all been clubbed together and put under one. There's been a new title added for web and design interface designers. Before that, we didn't have that particular job title, web and digital interface designers. We didn't have data scientists earlier. Now we have that. So there are a couple of data. So the other one is, I'm just trying to read from a table. Business intelligence analyst positions used to exist before, but don't exist anymore. So you see some have been removed. Some job titles have been added. Now, business intelligence analyst was a useful job title for business analysts. A business analyst is a very common job title in the IT field, and I'm talking mostly about IT today. So that's one field that has been removed. So we have to look, one title that has been removed. So we have to look for alternatives. For a business analyst, maybe we can use systems analyst as in place of that particular job title. Also, video game designers have been removed from the new code, from the new SOC 2018. And search marketing strategists also have been removed. So we have to look for those. We can't take it for granted that the job title that we knew or maybe we used to use in our company before, that we'll be able to use that. We might not be able to. So other than the change in the codes, there's also change in the job duties itself. So if I see I just looked into one of the job titles that changed, the software systems analyst, and I saw that superficially there was only a change in the SOC code. There was no other change. But if I look into it in more detail, and if I look into the job duties have also changed. So we cannot presume that things have remained the same. So if I look into the job duties, they've added a line. It says, analyze science, engineering, business, and other data processing problems to develop and implement solutions to complex application problems. They use the word complex application problems. So that gives me a clue that they now, think that a systems analyst position for sure is a more complex position requiring a bachelor's degree when compared to their analysis in the 2010 SOC code, because they've deliberately used the word complex. And this is good news for us because under the Trump administration, we pretty much couldn't use the job title of systems analyst because the USCIS kept saying it wasn't specialty occupation. So this really helps, and this I think helps us open the door to use software systems analyst as an alternative to software developer, because the wages for software systems analysts are actually much lower than that of a software developer. So that's good news for us that the duties also have changed to show that there's more complexity in the duties. So we can easily argue that a bachelor's degree is required because the duties are complex. So what has happened with these CAP cases is, because they were all filed before July 1st, the SOC codes, the new SOC codes were not reflected in the LCAs or in the prevailing wage. So the old SOC codes had to be used. And so there's a disconnect between, the code that should be used and the code that was actually used. So you might, because of that, get an RFE, because they might say that, oh, but the SOC code for a software engineer is blah, 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 but you've used the old code. And we had to, because, when we were filing the LCA, the new code was not reflected, right? So you might get an RFE saying that the code was wrong, and, you can always justify that by informing them that, the code was not available, and that was the available code at that time when you were filing. But this could also work to your advantage, because say at that time, for example, you used data scientist, and data scientists didn't have a separate code at that time. So you used either all other occupations code, which is kind of a catch-all for everything, or maybe you used a software engineer or software developer code. Now you can actually argue that, look, I used that code at that time and there was not much information available. And if you get an RFE now saying how is data scientist specialty occupation, you can argue that, look, as per the new SOC code, here it is, and data scientist requires a bachelor's degree as per the new code. So you can use it to your advantage as well, because you have more information available to you now. So that's, there are advantages and disadvantages. That's definitely an advantage. I think overall there are more advantages than disadvantages, because you have more codes available. You don't have to guess or use a code that is closest. You have more information available as to, which occupation requires a bachelor's and which doesn't. I mean, in addition to using the ONET, of course, you also have to use the Occupational Outlook Handbook. So, it's a stepping stone at least. You have to use two different databases. But at least if the one database for the ONET shows that a bachelor's degree is required, then it's easier for you to make your argument that, the position is specialty occupation. Now, the other problem that we can come across is with the PERM filing, with the labor cert filing, because, these codes, if they keep changing, for example, computer software engineers used to be 151031, that it was replaced by software developer applications 151132, and then recently again it was replaced as per the 2018 codes, and it's now 151252. So what happens then if we filed a PERM in 2010, right, when the original software engineer code was there, and then now you're filing an amendment, or you're downgrading your the same I-140, you're filing a new I-140 and downgrading the PERM to EB3 maybe, like we did in so many cases, right? In 2020, we downgraded from EB2 to EB3, and many of those cases were filed 10 years ago. So when we were filing the I-140, you have to use an SOC code, and it's a problem. Do you use the old code, which no longer exists, but that's the code that's mentioned in the labor cert, or do you use a new code, which is not mentioned in the labor cert, but is the correct code to use? So that's a dilemma that we are going to face, and we have to see how USCIS is going to react. I think it's better to use the new code and just argue that as per the present ONET, the old code is no longer valid and therefore you're using the new code. And I think USCIS should be okay with it. But it's, as you can see, it causes a lot of confusion.
Right, right.
And, when there's no sync between one database and the other, also causes a lot of confusion because things have changed midway while your H1B is pending or while your prevailing wage is pending. So, we don't quite know how USCIS is going to react to that or, how to resolve that situation.
Right.
These are the benefits. And so there are benefits as well as disadvantages, but overall, I think the SOC code has benefits.
Reddy. You're watching Sakshi TV Live, and this is Torni. Thank you.